Hello everyone. Today let's solve the problem number 2020 valid parenthesis. Right. So what the question states here, we are given a string containing only this one, either parenthesis. Just give me a second. Either here parenthesis or flare bracket or this one, square brackets, right? So we are given a string containing only parenthesis, flare bracket or the square brackets here. We have to check if it is valid sequence where there are three conditions. Open bracket must be closed by same type of bracket. See, if we have opened the this one parenthesis, then we have to close the parenthesis. And if we have opened this one, same thing. If we have opened this one, then we have to close with the flare bracket. If you have opened the square bracket, then it has to be closed with a square bracket, right? Open brackets must be closed in the correct order. When I say open brackets must be closed in the correct order, so whether it can be like this or we can just have the square bracket closed here and then the opening bracket. This is also fine. So the order must be equal here. See, this is first one and this is last one, or this can be like this as well. The first one and last one, that can be presented next as well, right? This order is fine as well. These two things it has to follow basically. Open brackets must be closed by the same type of bracket. Open brackets must be closed in the correct order. The third one is every closed bracket has a corresponding open bracket. Suppose here we have flare braces, closing flare bracket here. So we have to have the opening flare bracket. We have the this one, what do you call, closing square bracket. We should have the opening square bracket. We have the closing parenthesis. We should have the opening parenthesis as well. So that's what they have mentioned in the question. So these are the three requirements, or these are the three conditions that we have to keep in mind, right? So we have to check if it is valid sequence or not. So I have already said what is valid sequence. We have three conditions, right, that we discussed. So let's come to the first example now. Just give me a second here. Yeah, let's come to the first example. So here you can clearly see we have the opening parenthesis and the closing parenthesis, right? So we check for the three conditions. The three conditions satisfy here, right? In this case, so the output that we need to return here in this case is boolean value true. If it doesn't satisfy the condition, then either of the three conditions, then we have to return boolean value false in that case. See here, this one we have opening parenthesis, closing parenthesis, opening flare bracket, opening square bracket, closing square bracket, opening this one flare bracket and closing flare bracket. In that case we have to return true, right? So we have opening parenthesis, we don't have the closing parenthesis. Instead we have the closing this one square bracket, and we don't have the opening square bracket as well, right? So this is this doesn't satisfy the condition, either of the three conditions. So we have to return false in this case. So let's come to the example 4 here. Just give me a second. So let's come to the example 4 here. So this one also we have discussed. We have opening parenthesis here. Between the opening parenthesis and closing parenthesis, we have opening square bracket and closing square bracket, right? So this satisfies the condition, right? So we have to return true in this case, right? I hope this is clear. They have given wonderful examples right here, 4 examples, just for us to understand here, right? So this is fine. So what we have done now, I hope the question is completely clear. We have discussed the examples as well. I hope what we need to do is completely clear as well, right? So first what we'll do, we will discuss the approach followed by the edge cases one by one, and then finally write the code and discuss the complexities for the code that we have written. Initially, let's discuss the approach. So here, one thing we need to notice here is we are going for the stack based matching. When I say we are going for the stack based matching, so we are making use of the stack here, stack data structure, right? So just keep this in mind. So I am going with the same example, or the first example that they have given in the question. So we have already discussed this one, so it will be easier to understand if I consider this one for the approach, right? So we have the opening parenthesis and the closing parenthesis. So in this case we have to return true, right? So we have already discussed this one. So this is fine. Let's move on with the step-by-step execution. So the first step here is we will initialize an empty stack. We'll be making use of the stack, as I've said. First we will initialize, or we have to initialize the empty stack. This is fine. Let's move on with the second step here, right? Let's move on with the second step here. So we will iterate over this. We will iterate over opening parenthesis and the closing parenthesis. First, what we will do, we will push this one to the stack, right? So we will push the opening parenthesis into the stack. Now stack contains opening parenthesis, right? So now the stack contains opening parenthesis, right? So this is fine. So next what we will do, we will pop the opening parenthesis. Why we will pop the opening parenthesis? Because it matches the this one closing parenthesis. We have the closing parenthesis here, right? So we will check if the opening parenthesis has the closing parenthesis or not. Yes, it is there, right? So we will pop this one. We will pop the closing parenthesis because it matches with the opening parenthesis, right? We will pop the closing parenthesis, not the opening parenthesis. Sorry, first time I said it wrong, I guess. So here we will pop, we will pop the opening parenthesis itself because it matches with the this one closing parenthesis. So this is fine. So now the stack is empty because we have popped opening parenthesis as it matches with the closing parenthesis. Now stack contains nothing, or stack is empty, right? Let's move on with the third step here. As the stack is empty, this is valid sequence, right? As stack is empty, this is valid sequence. So the final output that we will return here in this case is Boolean value true. So the final output that we return in this case is Boolean value true. That's what we will return in this case, right? So Boolean value true we will return in this case. I hope this is clear. So this is the approach that we will be going with, right? Simple to understand, right? So as we are familiar with the approach, let's discuss the edge cases one by one. So the first edge case here is unmatched closing. So when I say unmatched closing, we have opening parenthesis and we have closing square bracket. So we don't have the closing parenthesis as well as we don't have the opening square bracket here. In this case, we have to return false accordingly with the question, right? So we need to return false in this case. So the second edge case that we need to keep in mind here is extra opening. So see here, we have opening parenthesis, we have closing, this one, these two are fine. We have opening, we have closing, these two are fine. We have opening, we have closing, but we have extra opening bracket and we don't have the closing parenthesis for that, right? So in that case, we have to return false as well, right? In that case, we need to return false as well. So this is fine. Let's move on with the third edge case here, mixed order. So we have opening flare bracket, closing flare bracket. We have opening square bracket and we have closing square bracket. We have opening parenthesis and closing parenthesis. In this case, we will return output true, right? In this case, we will return output true, right? So this is for the condition mixed order. So this is for the condition mixed order. This is fine. Let's move on with the fourth edge case here, empty string. When I say empty string, we'll be considering empty string in this case, right? Output will be true, right? Output will be true. For the empty string, we always consider directly output true. Just keep this in mind. This is for the edge case empty string, right? So we don't have any braces, I mean bracket at all, brackets at all or braces at all, right? In this case. So at the end, we have to get the empty string itself, right? So in this case, we directly have empty string, right? So in this case, we will return output true. We have to return output true. This is important edge case, that just keep this in mind, right? So the first edge case here is unmatched closing. The second edge case that we discussed here is extra opening. The third edge case that we discussed here is mixed order, and the fourth edge case that we discussed here is empty string. These are the four edge cases that we need to keep in mind, right? Sorry, just give me a second here. Yeah. Now we are familiar with the approach as well as the edge cases. It will be easier to write the code. Now let's start writing the code, or we have to implement or articulate the same, our thinking process in the form of code, right? So now we are familiar with the approach as well as edge cases. It will be quite obviously easier to write the code. Let's start writing the code. So here, let's start writing the code, right? So just give me a second here. So first what we'll do, we will create an empty stack. We have discussed this one. Let's create the empty stack quickly. So I'll just go with stack here. So we'll be making use of the character, right? So I'll just go with the type character here. This is fine. So I'll just make use of the variable name stack here. Let me give new stack. This is fine. So we are just creating the new stack, I mean empty stack here. This is fine. So the next step here is we have to iterate through the each characters, right? So we have to iterate through the each characters means we have to iterate through the this one specific what brackets. So that's what we have to iterate through the each character. This is considered as character within the strings they have given, right? So we have to iterate through the each characters. Let me make use of the for loop here. Char ch. Let me consider here s2. This one, let's consider convert this one to the character array. So I'll just give here char array. This is fine. So within the for loop, first step we have to push the opening brackets, right? So for that, if opening bracket is found, then we have to push that one to the initial step. If you remember, we considered this one first example and we pushed this one first. Then we check whether the corresponding closing bracket was found or not, right? First thing here is we have to push the opening bracket. For that, let's write the simple if condition here. We have considered individual character as ch, right? So I'll just give here ch equals this one opening bracket or ch equals this one flower bracket or another bracket was this one right? What do we call square bracket? This is fine. So then what we will do, we will push the opening bracket. So I'll just make use of the property push that is provided by stack. So I'll just go with stack.push of ch. This is fine. Else what we need to do, else if closing bracket appears first, then we have to return false in that case. If the closing bracket itself appears first, then we have to return false in that case, right? So what I'll do here, again simple if condition here, if stack dot is empty here in this case, stack dot is empty in this case, what we will do, we will return false in this case. This is fine. We will return false in this case, right? So first, the next step, we have to pop the last opening bracket, right? So we have to pop the last opening bracket. So how can I implement that one in the form of code? I'll just make use of char. So here top, I'll just give here, let's let me assign this one to the stack.pop. I'll just make use of the pop property that is provided by the stack, right? So here this is fine. Let's check if it matches or not, right? So if it matches, then we have to return false, right? So in this case, I'll just come here. If it doesn't match, we have to return false. Sorry, I got confused. If it doesn't match, then we have to return false. If not of is matching, I'll just give here is matching of top comma ch. Ch means first thing that we the opening bracket that we pushed into the stack. If it doesn't match the top means top of the stack is end of the stack, right? We are considering stack, not the queue here in this case, right? So just give me a second here. So here we are considering stack here. So this one is the first thing. If you push some bracket here, this one. So here suppose we have this one. What do we call? Square bracket, and we have closing square bracket, and this one. Top of the stack should contain the corresponding closing bracket of the opening parenthesis here, right? This one. So top of the stack is nothing but end of the stack. We are not considering queue here, right? So we are considering stack here, LIFO. So I'll just remove this one just for showing. I took that example. This is fine. So if it doesn't match, then we have to return false. If the opening bracket doesn't match the closing bracket, then at the end of the stack or top of the stack, then we have to return false in that case as well. So I'll just return false in this case, right? So then the final step, we have to check if stack is empty. Means only if stack is empty, means what we are doing, if the opening bracket is found, then we will check for the corresponding closing bracket. Then if the corresponding closing bracket is found, then we will pop the opening bracket, right? Then we will pop the opening bracket. Then the stack has to be empty. So we have already discussed this one in the approach, right? So then for that we have to write the code here, right? So I'll just give here in this case return stack dot, we will make use of the is empty property that is provided by stack, right? So is empty property that is provided by stack. The properties are almost same for the Java and JavaScript basically. So stack.isEmpty will be making use of. IsEmpty we have in JavaScript as well. So pop, push, these things we have in JavaScript as well. So the properties are almost same. So if the stack is empty, then it is said to be valid, right? We have discussed this one in the approach. So this is it. Next, one more thing, we have to check for the matching pairs, right? So we have to check for the matching pairs. Means suppose if we have opening parenthesis, the closing parenthesis, closing bracket has to be like we have the closing parenthesis or not. Suppose we have the flower bracket, then we have the closing flower bracket or not. Suppose we have the opening this one square bracket, then we have to check whether the closing square bracket is present or not. For that, let's write the function, another function, or you can consider a helper function. Let's write the helper function to check the matching pairs, right? So I'll just give your private boolean. So I'll just go with is matching. Is matching function here we have used somewhere this one. Is matching this one. I should have written this one, line number 12, after writing this function, right? So I hope you understand this one, right? So after writing this one, I should have written line number 12 and 13. Just I'm writing this one later, right? So I'm just telling this one. Note this one. After writing this function, I should have made use of is matching this one function here. I hope this is clear. I'm writing this one later. This is fine. So I'll just go with open as well as close, which is of the type characters, right? Which is of the type character here in this case. So this is fine. Let me return here. So open, I'll just give opening parenthesis, and we have to check for the close. I'll just give here in this case. So we are comparing this one, right? We are checking this one. Let me give double equals here in this case. I'll just go with closing parenthesis. This is fine. So let me copy the same thing and do the same thing for two more brackets. Nothing but here, just go with a flower bracket, and I'll just go with a square bracket. Let me come here. This case, just go with the closing flower bracket. I'll just go with closing square bracket. I'll just remove R as this is last one, right? So this is fine. So this is it for the code. Simple to understand, right? So let me format the code once and let me hit the run button. So I hope this works. We have illegal start of expression. Why this is illegal, man? So let's check what I have done wrong here. Just give me a second here in this case. So this is fine. Open equals this is fine, and close equals this is fine as well. So I forgot this one, semicolon. I have given semicolon as well. Let me hit the run button again. Let's see. So I have given return thrice, right? Me remove this one. So this is fine. So let me format the document once and let me hit the run button again. So I copied this line, so I forgot to remove the return. So yeah, now you can clearly see the sample test cases are getting passed. Let me hit the submit button quickly. So here you can clearly see all the test cases are getting passed. Means the code works absolutely correct in this case, right? Let's quickly discuss the complexities for the code that we have written. So the approach that we went with here is stack based matching. So the approach that we went with here is stack based matching. So what would be the overall time complexity here? The overall time complexity would be big of n. Why it is big of n here? Each character is pushed or popped once. So each character is pushed or popped once. Whatever input we have, each character is pushed or popped once exactly. That we have considered, right? So that we have discussed several times by considering examples. Also, we have discussed this one in the edge cases as well. So each character is pushed or popped exactly once. So here overall time complexity would be big of n. So what would be the overall space complexity or the space complexity here? The space complexity would be big of n as well. Why? Because stack stores at most n by 2 elements in the worst case. We know this one, right? Stack stores at most n by 2 elements in the worst case I'm speaking of, right? So overall space complexity would be big of n as well, right? So the time complexity and the space complexity for the code that we have written as big of n. So I hope the complexities are clear, right? So I hope whatever the code that we have written is completely clear as well, right? For now, this is it. Thanks for watching.